Alabama freshman Brandon Miller has been the revelation of the college season so far, and he's making a top 10 case in the 2023 draft. This is Floor and Ceiling, let's break him down. Now Miller is a bit older for a freshman at 19, and he'll be 20 by draft time. But there's a lot to like about his creativity and potential for versatility at 6'9". With Miller, I want to start from the perimeter. So far this season, he's been lethal spacing the floor, making 45% of his threes. The Alabama forward is doing this on high volume too. Miller takes a little over 7 threes a game, and he shot almost 100 triples already this season. 3/4 of Miller's threes are assisted, but I think that can be a little misleading. It's not like he's getting easy, wide open looks most of the time. Part of Miller's early appeal has been his shooting stroke at his size, and when you see a 6'9" freshman moving into a 3 like this, it's hard not to be impressed. Miller is a versatile shooter, and he's already comfortable doing quite a few things from the outside, such as rising into threes out of handoffs, where in particular Miller loves to lift from the corner up to the wing and into the tray. He already has enough leverage from beyond the arc as a college player, which is fair enough as Miller is converting on about half of his triples. Seeing as how he can turn a transition opportunity into a deep 3 like this, obviously you have to close out on him every single time. But like I hinted at, Miller can also make the quote-unquote easier sorts of threes. Right now, Miller is cashing in on a monster 49% on catch and shoots. That's an incredible number, more so for a player of his size and profile, but really for anyone. As I said, the Alabama freshman has NBA range, which makes him even more dangerous. He's made about 43% of those looks that extend past the college 3-point line, and Miller is similarly putting up good numbers on pull-up threes. Now clearly, this is something to note, but the volume is a bit lower on these types of triples. I'm not sure that Miller ever becomes a player who's creating a bunch of shots for himself, at least definitely not early on, but a lot of the tape is impressive. It's a combination of all the things we've seen so far with Miller, the range and the footwork, the ability to make threes in motion. And, like we'll get into very shortly, another hugely appealing part of Miller's package when paired with his shooting is his ball handling. The 19-year-old forward is dangerous in open court situations, both in terms of scoring and playmaking. Given how transition and perimeter oriented the NBA can be these days, there should be interest in Miller as early as the top 10 of the draft. Miller is really skilled in transition. He blends his size and handle to see over the top of opposing defenses as they're running back on D. In general, I've been impressed by the freshman's vision. Now Miller is not a point forward. Rather, he's a big wing who should get some reps on the ball. And because of his size, he has access to angles that others probably don't. There's been some positive flashes this season in the half court for Miller, namely in the pick and roll. Something to mention is that he does prefer to go left, but now that we know that, we can also focus on his rhythm and timing. Miller knows how to find his bigs when they roll to the rim. He has great zip and weight on his passes when they dive, and since we've already seen that he can do that with a rim running big at Alabama, then this should translate to the NBA with even better spacing. Overall, I'm encouraged by Miller's creativity and also his willingness to make mistakes against a set defense. The process or the reads are not always perfect, and we'll get into that shortly. But Miller's got some sauce on the ball, and NBA teams want 6'9" ball handlers. Miller isn't super explosive like we'll break down, but he's skillful and aware. He can play with his head up and scan the floor, seeing rotations, finding open players, and making the right pass. When the first-year Alabama wing attacks, he can pass off the live dribble, and really, I like it when he keeps it brief. Someone his size can do damage off just 1 or 2 dribbles, so he doesn't need to pound the air out of the ball. Going forward, I'm interested in seeing Miller do even more as a connective passer, which could mean as a short roller, as a trailer, or attacking those closeouts we saw earlier, but more so as a facilitator. Everything we've seen from Miller so far looks great, so you might be thinking, what's the catch? Well, the absolute biggest thing is that Miller just cannot finish at the rim. There he's shooting a quite frankly abysmal 44%. For all intents and purposes, Miller is creating all of these looks for himself and just barely converting. So why is that? The first thing that truly stands out is Miller's lack of burst. He's not really blowing by anyone in the half court at the NCAA level, so I have even more question marks about how the Alabama wing's finishing translates once he's in the NBA. Miller has a solid handle, and on drives, he likes to operate out of hang dribbles a lot of the time, but I'm not sure that a lot of the advantages that his ball handling creates consistently appear anywhere right now but in transition. Against a set defense, Miller can really struggle to create space. He has very little elevation, particularly in traffic, and he's very much a below-the-rim athlete. Miller is not afraid to take contact, but he's not strong enough to stay on balance when taking bumps, which makes it possible for defenders and rim protectors to get into his body. Miller tries a lot of finishes off of 2 feet, and since he can't create enough separation both laterally against his defender and then vertically once he gets to the rim, that makes him prone to getting blocked. Going back to that 44% at the basket, let's compare Miller's numbers to some of the 2022 draft's best wings. Jabari Smith, Ben Mathurin, AJ Griffin, and Jalen Williams scored between 62 and 65% of their shots at the rim. Simply put, Miller must improve here. There's times where he inexplicably misses bunnies, and it's tough to understand. There's a clear avenue to Miller becoming a pass dribble shoot 6'9" wing, but a big part of that will also be predicated on him being able to attack closeouts and take advantage of his 3-point shooting. This is what I'd like to see from Miller more often at the rim. The process honestly is similar to some of his misses, so that's why I think Miller is not a lost cause when it comes to this. Similar to his playmaking, I like how he operates at multiple speeds, using hezzies coming out of screens to keep his defenders guessing. The Alabama wing definitely has some craftiness to his game, such as on this possession. Miller gets the screen to go left, keeps his defender in jail with his handle and big frame, then switches hands to finish at the rim. In all fairness, Miller will need to keep working on his handle. It's pretty good for a 6'9" guy in the NCAA, and I don't think the flashes are fluky or anything, but some adjustments can still be made. For instance, he can still get lower to the ground at times. His handle can be too loose. He can be too left-handed. And he's still a little raw in the pick and roll. And while sure, Miller has 32 turnovers to 27 assists this season, I'd really read a lot more into the good than the bad here. Less encouraging right now is Miller's lack of self-creation. The best way to put this is that you don't want him taking defenders on 1v1. Miller hasn't shown that he can beat switches reliably, and in college, those bigs often do not have NBA level foot speed. He has a tough time creating separation and beating defenders off the dribble. Watch how easily Andre Jackson Jr. stays with Miller here. Or again, in this clip here, Miller can't get anywhere. He's 6'9", but doesn't operate with long strides, and I think he can still work on his body to become more flexible and get lower to the ground when handling. Then, his percentages from the mid-range are also very improvable. Miller is shooting a measly 30% on 2-point jumpers. That's only on 33 attempts, so the sample size is small, but the numbers so far and the flashes on the court have not been ideal. How NBA teams value this will depend on the role they envision Miller in. If he's a complementary wing who can drill threes at a high level and attack closeouts with solid passing and improved finishing, it's not a huge deal. But if you want him to become a near all-star player, then you need more, especially in a draft potentially as top-heavy as this one, because he's only scoring well from deep right now. Miller settles for a lot of turnarounds, and when they go in, they look great, but these are tough shots, and few players in the NBA even get to take these. On top of that, I'll also be tracking his 3-point shot. I do think he's going to be a dependable outside shooter long term, but I want to watch these pull-up threes. We're dealing with a small sample size right now that looks pretty good, but Miller can't really create his own shot from anywhere else. So if his 3-point percentage wavers a bit, even if only because of the pull-ups, then you have to think even more about what value he adds as a scorer. Moving to the other end of the floor, I'm not entirely sure what to make of Miller just yet. I'm cautiously optimistic, if only because a 6'9" guy with his feel should eventually figure it out on D. Right now, there's times he gets by simply on that. For example, these chase down blocks aren't things that just anyone can do. He's got some timing, and it helps that he has a massive runway to gather momentum and leap up for these rejections. Then, Miller has also flashed some sturdy defense in space. I like this possession here where Miller fights over the screen, gets back in front, and forces the miss. It's similar here, but Miller instead ices the screen, and then I'm impressed by how he switches onto the big and boxes him out of the paint before sprinting over to the contest. But there's other times where I wonder who Miller guards in the NBA. He clearly competes, but sometimes he just doesn't have enough foot speed. He's not a lockdown defender, and despite the size, you don't want him on someone like Marcus Sasser here. Finally, DeAndre Williams is someone Miller's size with a pro's body, and he easily manhandles the Alabama wing here. One last note is that protecting the rim does not come naturally to Miller at all, unaware of how to use his size, and sometimes a step late on his rotations. This isn't a knock on him because I'd expect Miller to be more used to defending like a guard or a wing, but it's worth thinking about because it limits Miller's versatility on D. Ideally, a 6'9" ball handler is someone like Ben Simmons, who you can downsize and supersize lineups with on defense. But right now, I'm just not sure where or on who you put Brandon Miller. Add his lapses in concentration, and sometimes the margin for error can feel minimal. To be clear, these are things every college freshman does, even if Miller is a year older for his class, but it's frustrating to watch him miss box outs, or to struggle navigating screens on the perimeter. I'm a big fan of Miller's strengths, but there's also a lot of parts to his game that need to be extensively fleshed out. So Brandon Miller is a really interesting case because I can totally understand the top 10 hype. 6'9" ball handler who's shooting lights out from 3. But on the other hand, there are some major improvement points. Obviously the finishing at the rim, being able to create for himself. The handle still needs some adjustments. Now on defense, I do think Miller will be okay, but how high you pick him depends on where you want him on your team. Do you see him as an all-star level prospect, or do you see him simply as a good role player? Maybe a third guy on a playoff team, something like that. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, make sure to leave a comment, tell me what you think of Brandon Miller, and as always, if you enjoy the content, if you enjoy the channel, make sure to subscribe. Take care, and I'll catch you guys next time.